The sun had barely climbed over the ridges of the Kandar Valley when the first echo of gunfire rolled through the dunes. The wind carried the sound like a rumor, twisting it through the dry air until it faded into silence. Somewhere on the northern slope, a single figure lay half buried in sand, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of her breath. Lieutenant Mira El-Sofi adjusted the dial on her scope, the glass glinting once before she covered it with her gloved hand. She hated when the sun caught the lens. Reflection gave away position, and in this place, exposure meant death. The locals had started calling her Alkeo the Ghost. To her unit, she was just Myra. Below her, a convoy of armored trucks crawled along the cracked road like metallic beetles. Through the crosshairs, she watched them, counting seconds between their stops, tracing patterns. Every rhythm told a story: fear, caution, exhaustion. She could read them all. Her radio crackled softly. Shadow 1. Confirm eyes on the target. She pressed her earpiece. Eyes on, she whispered. 3 vehicles. 1 command truck. Copy that. Fire only if they break north. Command wants intel, not fireworks. She exhaled, slow and steady. Roger. The silence returned thick, heavy, almost holy. Myra's world narrowed to the circle of her scope and the beating of her own heart. 10 years of service had taught her how to become invisible. She wasn't hiding. She was blending a piece of the land itself. Her father's voice drifted back from memory. A sniper doesn't shoot first. Mira, she listens. The world will tell her when it's ready. The world spoke. A soldier stepped out of the command truck, sunlight flashing off the insignia on his chest. Myra's finger tightened, then stopped. Orders were orders. Observation only. But as she watched, she saw something else: a young shepherd walking across the ridge, unaware, holding a staff, herding goats, straight into the convoy's path. The officer lifted his rifle. Myra's mind snapped. Not today. She shifted half an inch, calculated distance, wind, drop everything, automatic now. Her breath became a line of control. The trigger gave way with a crisp click. The shot traveled less than a heartbeat. The officer dropped. The shepherd ran. The desert went still. Shadow 1. What the hell was that? She didn't answer immediately. The static hissed like judgment in her ear. Target neutralized. She said finally. Civilian safe. A long pause. You just bought yourself a debrief. She knew what that meant: questions, suspicion, maybe worse. But she didn't care. She'd seen too many innocents buried under the name of strategy. Packing up, she swept sand over her footprints, broke down the rifle, slid it into its case. When she stood, there was nothing left to mark her presence: no shell, no shadow. Just the whisper of wind where a ghost had been. By the time command drones reached the ridge, she was already gone, moving through the canyon. Who'd pulled low, blending with the rocks. In her pocket, the photo of her brother killed in the first ambush of this war rubbed against her palm. She looked at it once, then tucked it back. You'd have done the same, she murmured. The radio clicked again, this time with a different voice. They know your name now. Ghost word is they've placed a bounty. Myra stopped walking. For a moment, the desert felt colder. Then she smiled, small, calm, almost kind. Then let them come, she said. The ghost still breathes. And with that, she disappeared into the wind. 2 days after the shot that saved the shepherd, the base was silent in that heavy way. Soldiers recognized the silence that comes before judgment. Lieutenant Myra El-Safi sat across from Colonel Darius Hovel in a dimly lit operations tent. Maps covered the walls. Red pins marked enemy strongholds. Blue lines showed their own shrinking control zones. The colonel's face was carved from stone, his eyes tired but sharp. You disobeyed a direct order, he said flatly. Myra kept her gaze steady. A civilian was in the line of fire. We're not here to play guardian angel, Lieutenant. You risked exposure. She didn't reply. There was no point. To some, her bullet had been a mistake. To her, it had been instinct, the kind that kept her humanity from turning to dust. After a long pause, the colonel sighed and leaned back. You've made yourself a legend out there. The enemy thinks you're a ghost. He pushed a data tablet across the table. On it was an intercepted broadcast, grainy footage of enemy soldiers waving posters, her silhouette sketched in black. Across the bottom, text in Arabic scrolled like a curse. 10 million dinars for the woman called Al-Khayal, dead or alive. Myra stared at the image, her faceless outline staring back. A ghost indeed. You've got a price now, the colonel said quietly. You're not just a soldier anymore. You're a symbol, and that makes you dangerous. She closed the tablet. Then maybe that's exactly what we need. That night, she sat alone on the roof of a half-destroyed barracks, cleaning her rifle under a sky littered with stars. Around her, the desert stretched endless and quiet, like a sea of shadows. The base lights glowed faintly below little islands of humanity in a world that had forgotten mercy. Sergeant Yusuf climbed up beside her, 2 mugs of bitter black coffee in hand. He'd been with her unit since the beginning, older, slower, but unshakably loyal. You know they doubled the bounty today, he said, handing her a mug. 10 million wasn't enough, apparently. Mira smiled faintly. Guess I'm popular. Popular people usually end up dead. She took a sip. Everyone ends up dead, Yusuf. It's the why that matters. He studied her quietly for a moment, then said, You don't have to keep doing this alone. She glanced at him. Don't I? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew what she was, a sniper trained to work unseen, to live in silence. The ghost couldn't have friends. The ghost only had targets. Down below, a siren wailed once and stopped. The night returned to stillness, somewhere far beyond the horizon. The enemy was already hunting. Mira looked through her scope again, scanning the darkness out of habit. Every dune, every ridge was familiar to her now. The desert was her home, her cover, her ally. She thought about the bounty, the faces of the men searching for her. They didn't know her name, her past, her reason. To them, she was just a myth, a phantom with a rifle. But to Myra, this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about balance, about making sure every life taken by war meant something. Her fingers brushed the worn photo of her brother again. His smile still looked alive in the dim light. They think I'm hiding, she whispered to the photo, but they don't know I'm watching. At dawn, reconnaissance reports came in. 3 enemy generals had arrived at a fortified camp deep in the desert, planning the next assault. The same camp responsible for the ambush that killed her brother. Mira's orders were clear. Observe only, no engagement. But her heart already knew otherwise. The bounty had made her a target. Now she would return the favor. You placed a price on my head, she murmured, snapping her rifle case shut. Let's see how much yours are worth. And as the first light broke over the sand, the ghost went hunting. 3 nights passed before Myra moved. She spent those nights in the northern ridge, studying the terrain through her thermal scope, mapping wind directions, counting the patrol rotations. Every hour she marked times in her worn notebook, neat lines of numbers, notes about shadows, and where the moonlight hit the camp walls. To anyone else, it looked like chaos. To her, it was rhythm. War always had rhythm. From her perch, she could see the enemy's forward operations base, a sprawl of steel containers and sandbag towers surrounded by razor wire. Drones buzzed overhead like metal flies. Inside, under layers of camouflage netting, 3 tents glowed faintly from electric lanterns. Those were her targets, Generals Farouk and Idris, the architects of the ambush that took her brother's life. They were careful men, paranoid, surrounded by guards and cameras, but they'd made one mistake. They believed the desert belonged to them. Myra lay prone, body flattened against the sand, her rifle steady on a stone ledge. She could feel the warmth of the barrel through her gloves. The nights were cold, but her hands never trembled. In her earpiece, Yusuf's voice came through faintly. Shadow 1, status. Still observing, she whispered. They've changed patterns. More patrols, more tech. They're scared. They should be. Mira allowed herself a quiet smirk. They put a bounty on me, Yusuf. They want the ghost. They'll get her. She adjusted her lens, zooming in on the camp's main gate. Soldiers laughed, smoking near the checkpoint. One leaned against a wall, tapping a message on his phone. She watched every small detail, the angle of the cameras, the position of the snipers on the towers, even the direction of their gazes. The camp was alive, but it didn't know it was being watched. As she observed, her thoughts wandered not to fear, but to the past. She remembered her brother's voice in the static field comes that day. They've surrounded us. Mira, don't come. Then the explosion. Then silence. That silence had followed her ever since. Every mission, every shot. She didn't hunt for glory. She hunted for balance. By the second night, she had their routine memorized. The 3rd general, Idris, was the most cautious, rarely left his tent, always flanked by guards. Farouk, the loud one, liked to walk the perimeter after sunset. Belan, the strategist, stayed up late, smoking near the communication tower, radioing other camps. Mira smiled slightly. You all have habits, she muttered. Habits get you killed. She adjusted her scope once more, and through the thermal lens, she saw something unusual. Heat signatures moving behind the east dunes. Not patrols. To organize. Her radio hissed. Shadow 1, enemy recon teams deployed, Yusuf reported. Looks like they're sweeping the ridges. They're hunting me, Myra said. You need to pull out. No, I'll move first. She turned off the radio. Silence returned, her oldest ally. Packing her gear, she shifted position under the cover of darkness, crawling through the sand until the base was a dim glow behind her. She stopped beside a wrecked truck half buried in dust and set up her second firing nest. From here, she had a clean line to all 3 command tents. Hours passed. She didn't move, she didn't blink. Just before dawn, General Farouk stepped out of his tent, stretching a cigarette between his lips. His guard handed him coffee. The faintest light of sunrise hit his face. That was all she needed. Her breath slowed. Her finger tightened. The rifle spoke. One clean whisper through the morning. Farouk's coffee spilled into the sand as his body crumpled. The camp exploded into chaos, shouting, alarms, flashlights. But Mira was already sliding backward, packing her rifle, fading into the dunes. 1 down, she whispered into the night. 2 to go. The bounty hunters could search the whole desert, but you can't catch what's already watching you. The morning after Farouk fell, the entire desert seemed to tremble. Columns of smoke rose from the enemy camp as soldiers shouted orders and trucks kicked up clouds of dust. From miles away, Myra watched the commotion through her binoculars. One shot had turned the hunters into prey. She sat in the shade of a ruined fuel truck, sipping the last of her lukewarm water. The metal smelled of rust and sand, but it gave her cover. Her rifle lay disassembled beside her, pieces gleaming faintly in the sun. She could feel the heat through her boots, smell oil and dust on the wind. Her radio crackled. Shadow 1. You stirred the hornet's nest, Yusuf said. They've called in more men. You need to fall back. Not yet, Myra replied. They still have 2 generals left. Command wants you back for debrief. She smiled faintly. Tell Command they can debrief a ghost. She turned the radio off. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to close her eyes. Sleep never came easily, only short bursts of half-dreams, her brother's laughter, the explosion, the sound of sand hitting metal coffins. When she awoke that night, the wind had shifted east. A sandstorm brewed at the horizon, good cover for her next move. General Bellin was meticulous, a man of schedules. Every night at 0200 he left his tent, smoked a cigarette by the communications tower, and checked transmissions from the front. Myra had confirmed the pattern 3 nights in a row. By midnight she was already crawling across the rocks, the storm wind biting at her scarf. The darkness was alive with grit and dust. Visibility was down to meters, perfect. She found her spot between 2 jagged stones, assembled her rifle by touch, each motion practiced and quiet. The storm howled like an angry god, swallowing every other sound. Through the scope she could barely see the shapes of men moving inside the camp. Lanterns flickered, tarps flapped, and then there he was. Bellin stepped into view, clutching a radio handset, coat collar pulled high. He paused to light a cigarette, the brief spark painting his face. Mira's breath slowed. The reticle steadied, wind from the left, 45 kilometers per hour. She adjusted 3 clicks right. She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked softly. The bullet cut through the storm like lightning. Bellin's body folded before the echo reached the walls. The radio hit the ground, hissing static. Mira waited only a moment before packing up. The guards were shouting again, blind in the storm, firing into the night. She slid backward down the slope, disappearing into the storm that hit her as if the desert itself wanted her gone. Retreat by dawn. She was 20 kilometers away. Crouched inside an abandoned watchtower, checking her rifle, her hands moved automatically, cleaning the sand from the chamber. She switched her radio back on. Yusuf's voice came through, raw with static. We picked up the blast. Was that you? The second one down, she answered. You're playing a dangerous game, Mira. It's not a game. There was a pause. Then Yusuf said softly, they've tripled the bounty. Every mercenary from here to the border is coming for you. Mira leaned her head against the wall and closed her eyes. Let them try. For a long moment neither spoke. Then she added quietly, Bellin was responsible for the northern strike. My brother died there. I know, Yusuf said. And the last one need. Her eyes opened, hard as stone. He planned it. That night she packed light. 1 rifle, 1 knife, half a canteen of water. She left the watchtower before moonrise, moving through the dunes like a shadow. Farouk was gone. Bellin was silent. Only General Idris remained. And when the sun rose again, he would finally learn what kind of ghost he had angered. By the time the second general's body was flown out, every soldier in the desert knew her name. Al-Qayyul, they whispered the ghost. Posters with her silhouette hung in outposts. Convoys drove with headlights off, and even hardened mercenaries checked the ridges twice before lighting a cigarette. General Idris stayed awake through the nights now. He had doubled his guards, ordered search parties to sweep every dune. Drones circled above his camp like vultures, but he still felt watched. In his tent, the generator's hum sounded like breathing. Every shadow seemed to move. On the fourth night, the storm finally cleared. The desert lay under a thin moon, sharp and cold. Somewhere out there, Mira waited. She was 3 kilometers away, crouched in the wreckage of an old radio tower. Her rifle rested across her knees, wrapped in cloth to hide its shine. Through her scope she could see Idris pacing, his coat open, his face lined with exhaustion. Around him, floodlights cut hard circles in the sand. He's tired, she thought. Good. She switched to thermal. Bright shapes everywhere, guards, engines, heat from floodlights. The camp was chaos, pretending to be control. She waited, tracking every movement, marking each routine. Her pulse matched the rhythm of the wind. The voice in her earpiece startled her. Shadow 1. This is Yusuf, command, says extraction in 2 hours. You don't need to do this. I do, she said quietly. For him, your brother, and for the ones who never got justice. She switched the radio off before he could answer. Hours passed. Patrols rotated. The moon dipped lower. Myra shifted, muscles burning, eyes never leaving her scope. Then it happened. Idris stepped out of his tent without his helmet, waving away his guards. He wanted air, maybe a moment of peace. She exhaled, sliding the bolt into place at 600 meters. The shot would need compensation for wind drift. She adjusted, feeling the desert breathe around her. Her world shrank to the reticle and the man who had started everything. In her mind she heard her brother's laugh, the crack of that first explosion, the silence afterward. This ends now. She pulled the trigger. The recoil nudged her shoulder, soft and final. Idris staggered once, confusion on his face, then fell. The sound reached the camp a heartbeat later, shouts, sirens, chaos. Mira stayed prone, watching as soldiers ran in circles, firing into darkness. She didn't move. The rifle cooled under her hands, its metal sighing. Then she did something she had never done before. She took a small transmitter from her pocket, switched it to the enemy frequency, and spoke. This is the Ghost. Her voice calm low. You placed a bounty on me. Consider it paid. The line went dead. She broke down her rifle, piece by piece, sliding each part into its case. No hurry, no panic. By the time the first drones reached the tower, she was already miles away, walking toward the horizon where the sand met the sky. At dawn, Yusuf found her on the ridge, leaning against a rock, staring east. He approached slowly, not sure what to say. It's over, he said. Nothing's ever over, she replied. But the desert remembers. He handed her a small envelope, official papers, reassignment orders. They're calling you back to base. Command wants a statement. She smiled faintly. A statement? She looked out at the endless dunes. Tell them justice doesn't need one. Yusuf nodded. What about the bounty? She looked at the rising sun. They can keep it. Some debts aren't meant to be paid. The wind picked up again, carrying sand across the valley. When he turned back to speak, she was already walking away, a fading outline against the light. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, the Ghost was gone. The war dragged on for months after General Idris fell, but it was different now. The enemy moved slower, spoke quieter, and kept their heads down when they crossed open ground. Every echo of gunfire in the valley made them flinch. Every shadow on a ridge made them wonder if the Ghost had returned. In the capital, reporters asked questions that no one could answer. Command denied everything, but stories spread faster than bullets. Some said she'd been killed, others that she'd left the army. A few swore they'd seen her silhouette at dawn on the dunes, the barrel of a rifle glinting like a piece of the sun. Yusuf stayed on base, fielding reports. Sometimes at night he'd switch through the encrypted channels, half hoping to hear her voice again. He never did. The only sound was static, and through it, the wind. Myra walked alone through the borderlands, carrying a small pack and the rifle broken into 2 parts. The war zone ended somewhere behind her, though she could still smell the fuel smoke when the wind changed. Villagers were rebuilding, children running between shattered walls, women hanging washed clothes on lines that once held camouflage nets. She helped where she could, fixed a generator here, gave away a ration bar there. No one recognized her. To them she was just another traveler with tired eyes and a soldier's gait. At night she slept under the open sky, the stars clear and cold. Each one reminded her of the men and women she'd lost. She would whisper their names into the dark, one by one, until she reached her brothers. I kept my promise, she'd say softly. It's done now. But she knew promises in war are never really done. Weeks later, a caravan driver passing through the valley told a story in the nearest town. He said he'd seen 3 graves at the edge of the desert, simple stones. No names, marked only with bullet casings pressed into the sand. Beside them, carved into rock, one word. Locals added to the legend. Some said a woman built those graves for her enemies. Others said for her friends. Either way, the place became sacred ground. Travelers left offerings, their spent shells, flowers, scraps of uniform. The soldiers who came after her whispered that the desert belonged to the ghost now, that anyone who spilled innocent blood here wouldn't live to see sunrise. Back at the outpost, Yusuf received a small package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph of the old unit Mira standing beside her brother, both smiling, sand on their boots. Behind it, a note written in careful script. He stared at it for a long time before locking it in his drawer. That night, he stepped outside and looked toward the horizon. The air was still, the desert quiet. Somewhere out there, he imagined her moving unseen, like heat in the distance. Years passed. The war ended. New lines were drawn, new flags raised. But every once in a while, a sniper round would find its mark in a place no one thought reachable. Every once in a while a convoy would stop mid-journey to find a single bullet lodged in its commander's vehicle, unfired, stamped with a tiny engraving, Al-Khayyal. And in that moment, soldiers would lower their rifles and listen, because even the wind seemed to whisper her name. No one ever saw her again. Some said she vanished into the mountains. Others claimed she trained a new generation of shadows. But the truth was simpler. Myra had become what the desert always wanted her to be: quiet, eternal, unseen. When the sun sets over Kandar Valley, the dunes turn red like spilled memory. If you stand still long enough, you might hear it: the soft click of a rifle bolt, the breath of a patient hunter, and a voice carried on the wind. You can't kill what already walks in the shadows. And somewhere, in that endless silence, the ghost still watches,